Welcome back to the Advisor Collective, where today I'm here with Jack Perkins, the V8 supercar driver and ambassador for Drive for Diabetes Detection. How are you this afternoon, mate?
Yeah, going well, Brad. Nice to be on here with you. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, me too, mate. How does it feel to be on the other side of the mic for once? Usually it's a bit of a role reversal here. Usually you're the one asking the questions.
It's good, mate. To be honest, it is funny when you can be on sort of both sides of the interview, but sometimes you've got to be careful when you're answering the questions that you're not, trying to be, on the wrong side. You could sometimes answer the questions like you're asking them. So it's something I'm looking forward to, mate. Actually, it's gonna be good.
Was it hard to make that transition from driver to the person interviewing the ones driving? Did you just sort of pick up the mic one day and wing it, or how did that come about?
Wow, it's an interesting one. I mean, I often talk to people about it because as a young bloke, I was always aspiring to be a race car driver, and that was sort of what I was always focused on. I never contemplated life in the media or a media gig, so it was never something that I kind of set out. I mean, I never went to university and studied how to do it or anything. It's just something that's kind of evolved. And for me, I've had a pretty successful driving career, racing in supercars, and then over time, there's been opportunities as I've sort of not been a full-time driver where I'm racing less, where people would sort of see if I was interested in commentating or talking about the motor racing, motorsport, supercars, etc. And I obviously really enjoy the sport. I enjoy talking about it. So I guess I've done something okay because I keep getting asked back by a few different people to do that role. And certainly now, as I am getting older and looking to sort of get away from the driving at some stage, in the future, yeah, it's certainly a life after driving. If I could be still involved with the sport in a media role, it would be fantastic. But it's pretty ruthless little industry in the media, so you've got to always have a little bit of point of difference, but also just keep making the most of the opportunities. And yeah, this year working with Channel 7 on the broadcast and a couple other the supercars broadcast and a couple other motorsport type things. It's really good, and looking forward to just, like I said, keep making the most of all the opportunities.
Well, with a moustache like that, I'm sure they're going to keep you around for at least until November, I dare say. So how far would you want to take it then? Can we see you at the Commonwealth Games next to Bruce McAvaney commentating there as well? Or is there a drive to really pursue that? Or how far do you want to take it?
Well, just touching on the moustache, you got me at a time where I am growing something that's not necessarily part of my TV role, but that's something I can't give away too many details. But I'm working on a moustache for a particular reason for an event next month. So that won't be when I'm next working for Seven. I'll be clean skinned by then. But in terms of the commentary side and kind of working in a TV role, it's pretty challenging, I think, to kind of sneak across codes when you come from a discipline in that's so specific as motorsport. And it's not so much from my side, but most people see a Formula race car driver and then like someone slowly getting involved as a commentator or as a TV host or a sports commentator. You become very sport specific. So especially in motorsport, people will associate me, especially say at Channel 7, for example. They've got motorsport there, and that's sort of where my name fits under. Then obviously with their footballs and Commonwealth Games and whatnot, they've got people that are sort of general commentators, probably not necessarily affiliated to any one particular sport, which, like you said, Bruce McAvaney, he's an absolute gun. And back in the early 90s, he used to host and commentate on Channel 7's Bathurst coverage of the supercars. And not many people that follow Bruce now know that. They kind of relate him to his football, his horse racing, and indeed his Olympics and Commonwealth Games. So in answering the question more specifically, I'd love to try and cross codes at some point, but getting that chance would be pretty tricky. But if I could keep getting opportunities in motorsport, and then I love my cricket in the summertime, and a couple other little sports. I think if you've got a bit of a passion for the sport, it probably makes it a bit easier, because if someone said to me, go and commentate the Commonwealth Games volleyball, well, I wouldn't know anyone's names, details, histories, and I'd be sort of forcing myself to probably get to know, people's statistics, their personal information, their professional career backgrounds. Whereas, I could jump into a Formula One, NASCAR, IndyCar, V8 Supercar broadcast, and kind of, because I follow the sport, I could reel off everyone's names and kind of make it all work pretty well. Whereas I feel like something in the Commonwealth Games, unless it was motor racing, might be a little bit out of my comfort level. But you sort of got to open your horizons. Someone like Mark Howard is a great friend of mine and a fantastic sports broadcaster, and he was kind of associated with motorsport to begin with, and now he's flat out on the AFL cricket with Triple M Radio and Fox Sports. So he's been able to digress himself really well. So yeah, I hope that one day I might be able to get an opportunity, at least in another code, and it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's good. Good to know that it can actually happen, like people have done it. And then you said you're going to, you do want to step away from motor racing over time. You're currently pretty heavily involved in Perkins Engineering now as well. Is that what's your role there? I hear you're sort of taking over the shop a bit there.
Well, it's funny because I've actually never really been a full-time professional, full-time paid motorsport kind of guy. I've always had a day job, so to speak. So I've been a kind of a jack of all, master of none. Got into mechanical engineering at university. Decided I wanted to get into work straight away. Started as an apprenticeship as a diesel fitter. Worked in various race teams in some different areas of race teams I was driving for. I finished up as a sign writer. I was a sign writer for 3 years. And then I actually sort of started back with my family business when I finished up as a sign writer. Dad had sold the business to another race team, and I started giving him a hand to move out of what was then his sort of 25-year-old factories back in 2012. So Dad said, give us a hand. And I said, yeah, no worries. So I started getting out of it. And the business of Perkins Engineering since 1985 had manufactured 49 race cars and 198 racing engines. So there was over 200 customers out there that were kind of really a bit upset that the business was being sold and they'd lose a little bit of customer support network and things like that. So I sort of started to integrate with the customer base and build relationships with a lot of the customers that still had Perkins cars and things, and just started to do more and more with those guys to a point now where, yeah, it's now might be my full-time job for a long time, where we manufacture parts for race cars, we restore race cars, we supply information, history, documentation for race cars, and assist people with racing cars. So yeah, that's kind of been my 9 to 5, if you like, for at least the last sort of 7 or 8 years. And now we're going through the process of moving factories again, which has been a big task. We're just sort of downsizing our floor space, if you like, based on what we're doing, which is just a couple of projects here and there for various customers, and working on a few cool toys for some customers as well. So yeah, that's something I've really enjoyed doing, and like I said, being able to make a business out of it, and it's something that I'm quite passionate about.
Did you find the clients or customers really appreciated you reaching out and calling them personally? Like not only you the face behind the wheel, but also the face of the business personally reaching out to calling them? Did you get a warm reception from that when you reached out?
Yeah, well, a lot of the guys I'd never really met before, so they were people, whether I reached out to them or they reached out to the business. It was more of a sense of trying to understand that if they had an old Perkins race car, like for example, I've got 2 guys over in Perth with old Perkins race cars. They were sort of, if I crash my car, what do I do now that Perkins has sold the business and all this sort of stuff. So I think it was probably reassuring for a few of those people that we hadn't just kind of shut up shop and disappeared.
Yeah.
And now, since then, and the way that the landscape has changed with Holden, retiring in Australia, the price of restorations and all the old historical stuff coming up and up and up through COVID, it's been a really cool little thing that we've been able to set up. And yeah, it's not a functioning race team like it used to be. It's something that's a lot smaller and a lot different, but has got a great little supporter base around the country, not just with owners, but we build up a Facebook page to try and have a modern day notice board or a newsletter where you can kind of ask questions, even me asking people for some advice or chasing parts and rare components and things like that. So I think we're up to 35,000 people, somewhere around there. Haven't paid for any followers or any of that crap. We've just got a good little following of people that are enjoying what we're doing. And we're sort of setting an industry standard now with the way we restore our cars. It's very, very high level and very transparent in the sense that we do lots of photos and videos through Facebook and YouTube. And unfortunately, a lot of car restorations, a lot of people kind of do shit work and kind of cover up bodgy jobs and things, whereas we've been really open and transparent with what we do. And I think a lot of people then appreciate the amount of effort that goes into a particular project, and then that can help generate future work. So we're working on, obviously, our current workload is quite challenging, but we're coming to the back half of some 3 or 4 year old projects, and then we're looking for our next couple of projects as well. So it's pretty exciting times, and hopefully I guess the interest in this generation keeps going. I think it's one of those things that's really heavily driven by passion. So people that grew up younger than you and I in their early 20s that love watching or dreaming of owning particular cars, and now they're probably in their 40s or 50s or 60s and they've retired or been successful in business, they can sort of play with a few toys. And that's kind of my customer, sort of, in a bit of a generalization. But yeah, it's very passion driven.
And are you still passionately driven for driving your V8 cars? Is that still a strong love for yours and a career going forward?
Yeah, well, so racing these days consists, I probably only race 4 or 5 times a year, and I'm really only doing those races in preparation for Bathurst. So, supercars racing throughout the year in the sort of home and away season is one driver, and then they get to towards the back end of the season, and there's a couple of endurance races where the distance of the races are quite long and they need 2 drivers. So when they need 2 drivers, they've obviously got to go literally out and find another driver, and that's sort of where I've been quite successful since 2015. I've been a part-time co-driver, if you like. Yeah. And my motivation for that has always been to try and win Bathurst, which the Bathurst 1000 is kind of the biggest motor race in Australia. It's also one of the biggest sporting events in Australia. So, for me, that's always been my motivation and my dreams to be a Bathurst winner. And I finished 3rd there in 2019. And my hunger and passion and things are still there, but approaching sort of late 30s, it's sort of the changing of the guard, and I see a lot of the young kids coming through. And when I was a young kid, obviously someone stepped out of the way to make way for me. And it's certainly something, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's happening soon, I would have thought, in the next few years. And hopefully in that time I can win Bathurst. But if not, I can still be proud of my achievements, but also knowing that, I might be able to get out of the road and let the next young kid come through and make another career for someone else. So if Bathurst got banned, then I probably wouldn't be a race car driver anymore, because that's my motivation. And if there wasn't Bathurst, then I'd be probably doing something else.
So talking about you, I guess, finishing up, I guess, at your own choice, if we went back in time to when you were forced to stand down when your diabetes situation, how did that feel when you were sort of in the peak of really enjoying it, you were really hungry, and then you were forced to stand down? How did, like, obviously it made you feel shit, but in your words, how did that make you feel at that time?
Yeah, well, that's sort of, I guess, another part of why I start the conversation of talking about when the end of my driving career is approaching, because I've got obviously some health battles that I've faced, which I think will probably cut me short as opposed to someone that might be able to race till they're 45 or 50. But at the time, that was probably one of the trickiest things I'll ever navigate my way through in my life. You set your aspirations and goals as a young kid to achieve the top level of something. And in my case, it was, let's try and become a professional racing car driver and get on the grid at Bathurst. And I had been chasing that dream since a young kid, racing go-karts from when we were 10 or 11 years old, right through to, starting to then step up the ladder and race cars and into Formula Fords and then into supercars and whatnot. So that was, at a time where I just got announced to be racing at Bathurst, and then I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and it was, just an incredible situation where you go from the highest of highs of sort of realizing your goals are going to be met, and then having a pretty big low in your personal sort of life or your health, and a doctor telling me that I'd probably never be able to race cars again. So this is way back in 2006. I've just turned 20, and you just never, you're on top of the world. You never kind of think that something is going to turn your life upside down at that time. And I sort of set about sort of working out how I could continue to race. I've still had arms and legs and things like that. So there was nothing to say I physically couldn't do it. It was just to get an understanding of the condition. And I kind of went about that quite privately. And then sometime later, I became public with the condition, which was, still a fantastic thing to do in the end, because it enabled me to sort of show people what I was doing with type 1 diabetes. It opened up a lot of opportunities for others as well. So, my role in the community was, as an ambassador, I guess, in a way, and I started to work with a few of the charities and, really sort of show people that you can kind of do anything you want to. You just got to put your mind to it and a bit of discipline, and you can make it happen.
I think reading about your journey of when you were told no and you didn't take no for an answer, you really challenged what appeared to be. I think it's quite an admirable journey for, I guess, anyone. Like you said, you hit your highs, but then when you hit your lows, what was your driving force, or what made you to keep focused on getting back, knowing that one day you will get back in that driver's seat and just keep ticking along? Was there something in particular that drove you or motivated you?
Yeah, for me, the motivator has been the motor racing. The dream of racing at Bathurst, winning Bathurst, being successful, all of those things. I'd made my mind up when I was as young as I can remember, whether it be a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old, that's what I wanted to do in life. I was always nagging my parents for a go-kart, and they used to always hand me golf clubs. And it wasn't until I was, 11, I think it was, when I first started racing go-karts. That's probably 4 or 5 years after I started nagging. That was just what I wanted to do. So when you then start climbing the ladder and you get so close and you get something potentially taken away from you, it becomes quite motivating. And for me, it's proving the situation wrong, not so much personal proving people wrong, but just sort of getting rid of the sort of persona. And in some cases, I had commercial pilots write to me, and people that have been sort of, discriminate is not the right word, but people with diabetes that sort of, maybe didn't quite get their jobs or lost their jobs or things or their dreams as a result of it, and kind of took no for an answer as opposed to not taking no for an answer. So, Yeah, for me, really lucky, and I speak to a lot of parents now, especially that their kids get diagnosed with type 1, and that it's hard because there's varying ages. I was lucky because I was sort of not you're probably never lucky, let's be honest, but I was 19, 20 years old. I was motivated to make a career. All my friends from school were at university and drinking and carrying on, and I was, out getting fit, watching motor racing, getting ready to go motor racing, doing whatever I could to go motor racing. So, when I chat to parents and kids these days, it's always like, see if you can, have a motivator as well, whether it be to play football or to do well in your studies, or whatever it may be. It certainly helps to have, a bit of a dangling carrot there, to show that you can, if you do all the right things, that you can sort of get to the end goal.
I think it's pretty cool that you had even commercial pilots coming forward to you. So it's almost like you led the way for those you were the voice when people were too shy about it or didn't want to speak up. When you did actually come out about it, rather than trying to keep it private, did you feel like that was a big weight lifted off your shoulder? Like you didn't have to worry about hiding it anymore. You could just be who you were and evidently inspire others as well.
Yeah, so there was a period there from around about September 2006, basically until the end of 2007, where I decided that if I didn't tell anyone that I had diabetes, that I would be able to keep racing, because this doctor sort of said to me that motor racing with type 1 diabetes is a no-no. There was some kind of grey area in the motorsport manual where people could have a racing license, but the distance of their racing was capped at 20 minutes or something like that. So it was not something that I would encourage, but obviously I wanted to set about coming up with an informed, disciplined approach to see how I could manage it, do it, and then living in such secrecy with only maybe a handful of people knowing, whether it be close friends or family. It's a tricky thing. I mean, you're having 5 injections a day. Back then, you used to have to prick your finger, draw a sample of blood and check the blood and all this sort of stuff. It's not easy to do in the public arena as well. You quite often going to the toilet, going into a cubicle just to have an injection or to measure yourself and all those sorts of things. It's just not behavior that you like doing, because people might think you're doing drugs or or being just doing weird stuff. I remember once I was having an injection on a plane, and the air hostess sort of saw me, and I sort of tried to hide it. She's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, please don't make a big deal of this. I'm just a diabetic, and it should be something that people with diabetes don't need to hide. It's like breastfeeding, for example. It's just part of life for people with type 1, and you shouldn't have to kind of hide what you're doing just to look after yourself, just to keep yourself alive. It's not something, especially at that age. So eventually that kind of got a little bit too much for me in a way. And then, then becoming public, and then becoming a race car driver with type 1, just, weight off the shoulders, gave me, great feeling of, like you said, helping other people out. Kind of people could start to realize maybe if my behavior in the last year was a bit sketchy or a bit different, people kind of go, oh, well, maybe that's why, that time Jack was a bit different or whatever. I had friends, when I'd go out for dinner, people would notice that every time a meal would turn up, I'd jump up and go to the toilet. I mean, it was quite weird that you'd think your meal would arrive. Most people get stuck straight into eating, and I'd go and have an injection preparing for the meal. So, people started to notice those trends and things like that. So, it's kind of not something you want to hide from people, and tremendous weight off my shoulders, and certainly not. I look back at my life and very pleased where I've ended up and how I went about it, and like I said, just encouraging others as well. It's been pretty cool.
So when you talk about encouraging others, is that what you take into your charity? You do a lot of charity work too around the diabetes. Is that sort of like your hints and tips, as I think I've seen, and just raising awareness and confidence around it? Or what's your what's your involvement with the charities, and how much do you show them?
Yeah, so I did quite a lot, especially when I first sort of came out with the condition. We had a walk for a cure around Bathurst and raised a lot of money. I think it was 20 or 30,000.
Yeah.
And since then, just doing bits and pieces for various diabetes-related charities, whether it be the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, Diabetes Australia, or the Danny Meads Barlow Foundation, all charities, especially around the big events, whether it be World Diabetes Day or Diabetes Week in Australia or anything. Whenever someone comes to me from a charity, I kind of have a, if I can do it, yes. If I can't do it, then unfortunately I can't do it. So whether it be public events, fundraising, certainly a lot more social media in this day and age, and just generally doing whatever I can to, whether it be raise awareness, raise funding, whatever that may be. I'm happy to put my name to it, and in recent times, I've been working with other foundations outside of diabetes as well, just to share the love around the place. It's not, so obviously diabetes becomes quite a little niche sort of area, whereas there's always various cancer charities I like to support where I can, and men's health and all those bits and pieces. So yeah, it's certainly an important part of life, and I always enjoy working with others.
Okay, well, that's really good. That pretty much answers all of my questions for the day. I'm glad to hear that you've definitely got a drive and a future coming forward. So we'll still see you around, and no doubt on the TV reporting. So thank you very much for your time today, mate, and we'll see you on the TV shortly.
Thanks, Brad. So yeah, looking forward to the next Supercars race on 7, and then obviously Bathurst I'll be driving. So I'm looking forward to that, mate. Can't wait.
I'll be cheering for you, mate. See you, buddy.
Cheers. Thanks, mate.